everybody, and welcome back to CHAUVET DJ Academy. In this lesson, we're going to talk about some audio basics. As mobile entertainers, the way our music sounds is critical. And whether you're playing music from a digital controller and a laptop, or a guitar, an iPod, or whatever, you want to sound your absolute best. And great sound starts with great speakers. So that's what we're going to focus on here. The first thing to understand about speakers is that there are two main categories of speakers, active or passive. To understand the difference between the two, it's important to have a general understanding about how speakers work. Since most individual speaker drivers, the components that convert electrical energy to sound waves, can't handle every low, middle, and high audio frequency and still sound good by themselves, most speaker systems use a combination of different drivers for each different frequency. One of the parts of a speaker, called a crossover, splits the audio signal into separate frequency bands that can then be separately routed to loudspeakers optimized for those bands. The terms passive, active, powered, and unpowered are often confused and used incorrectly, or at least interchangeably. The confusion lies in what specifically is being addressed with regards to the speaker. When used, these terms are either in reference to speaker amplification or the crossover. So, active is sometimes used interchangeably with powered and passive with unpowered. Active speakers have amplifiers built right into them, which means all you need to do is to run a cable from your sound source directly into the speaker to hear sound. But unlike a passive speaker, each active speaker does need its own power, so usually you need to place them relatively near a power outlet. Passive speakers, on the other hand, do not have an amplifier built into them, so they need to be connected to an external amplifier in order to produce sound. Passive speakers do not need separate power to operate. In general, most mobile entertainers would probably prefer the convenience of a powered speaker system that's all in one combined together. Some say the setup is much easier with powered speakers and they can cut costs and reduce clutter because they eliminate the need for additional expensive components like separate amplifiers. Other advantages include the fact that because a powered speaker is all-inclusive, the crossover components, the amps, the drivers, and speaker cabinets themselves are all manufactured with one another in mind. Other people point out that in order to include the amp in the speaker itself, manufacturers may have to sacrifice some quality in exchange for weight, size, and price. They prefer the option to use a separate amplifier of their choice with a passive speaker, which again doesn't need an additional AC power cord, so they can achieve what they believe is a higher quality sound. Another factor that you hear a lot about in speakers is wattage. There are two kinds of watts in speakers, max wattage and RMS wattage. By the way, RMS stands for root mean square. In the context of speakers, this is the square root of the maximum wattage of the speaker. Don't worry about that, but right now many speaker manufacturers market their speakers using the peak wattage number. This is the highest peak wattage a speaker could handle for only a very short time, maybe a second before blowing. The RMS wattage is what you normally would listen to for extended periods of time and is probably a more useful measurement. Remember, wattage does not necessarily translate directly to loudness. In general, you have to double the wattage to get a 3 decibel increase in sound output. So, a speaker with an efficiency rating of 92 decibels, for instance, can put out the same volume with half the power of a speaker with an 89 decibel rating. So, driver efficiency is also very important. Some say much more important than wattage to both loudness and quality. One speaker with lower wattage can sound better with another that has higher wattage because of the efficiency of its drivers. On the other hand, a large theater, for instance, will have thousands of watts in their speaker systems because they need that power to fill such a big room with loud sound. So, more wattage does make a system louder. But if you have poor efficiency drivers, all the watts in the world won't make that speaker sound good. Just like anything else, you need a balance. You need a decent level of wattage to get loudness, but you also need good quality, efficient drivers. In general, trust your own ears. Speakers are very subjective, and it can be challenging to recommend speakers for someone else. So, how many watts do you need in your speakers? Well, remember, it's not necessarily the wattage that's the most important factor in choosing speakers. But, in general, remember that every time you double the wattage, you increase the loudness by 3 decibels. So, let's say you found some fairly efficient speakers that do 90 decibels at 1 meter away with just 1 watt of power. So that would mean for 2 watts, double the power, you'd get 93 decibels, an increase of 3 decibels. 4 watts would get you 96 decibels, and so forth. Now, for a point of reference for the volume, take a look at this chart. 10 decibels is normal breathing sound, 60 is normal conversation, 110 is a power saw or car horn, and so forth. Gives you an idea of different levels of volume and what they represent. The powered speakers I use, for instance, are marketed with peak wattage of 400 watts. They have an RMS, or continuous wattage rating, of about 200 watts, with a continuous output of about 117 decibels at 1 meter away. Plenty loud enough for my needs for most venues I would use them in. Also, remember, if you're using passive speakers, you will have to use an amplifier that can deliver the correct amount of power to your speakers. Some manufacturers recommend you use an amp that delivers equal to or up to double the power rating of the speaker. For example, a speaker rated at 200 watts capacity needs a 200 to 400 watt amp. Believe it or not, you could hurt your speakers more with an underpowered amp than with one that has too much power. Subwoofers, or subs, are also important to your audio setup, depending on the venues you're performing in. A subwoofer is a speaker that is specifically designed to reproduce the lowest of audible frequencies. These are the speakers that give you the big bass, boomy sound that people can feel on a dance floor. Subwoofers can also be active or passive, just like your other loudspeakers. So, why do you need a sub? Well, because subs handle the lowest points of the audio spectrum. If you just incorporated a sub into the normal speaker itself, the strong vibrations from the bass frequencies could really compromise the mid and high frequencies and create poor sound. Oh yes, there's a lot of PA speakers that can respectably handle low frequencies. If I'm performing in a smaller room or venue, my PA speakers adequately handle the sound I need. But for the optimum sound, you should use a dedicated subwoofer. In general, let your workflow and the venues you perform in determine what kind of PA system you invest in and use. Listen to the speakers with your own ears before buying to determine which speakers sound best to you. It's really important because the best performance in the world won't matter if it sounds bad. This is the end of lesson number 4 of the expert level. Good luck on your quiz.